Hello, welcome. My name is Brendan. I am a facilitation manager at LifeLabs. So I oversee our East Coast facilitators here. And I've been facilitating and working with LifeLabs for over 5.5 years now. And I've been working in the field of learning and growth and development for over 10 years. I'm very excited to come together with you today to focus on something that is unavoidable, but something that we have to deal with. It is change. And we experience it day to day, we experience it quarter to quarter, year to year. Some of the changes that we experience are really big, systemic, and organizational ones. Some of them are very team-based ones, and others are just individual changes that we want to see within ourselves or individuals, others. So today is about what are some small habits and tools that I might use to actually optimize and enhance my change, whatever it is that I'm leading. So yeah, not so, and these tools are meant to, yeah, not just cut through resistance. Like that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes deal with change at an individual, a group level, and an organizational level. But maybe even help people get excited. Yes, I know it seems strange, but to even get excited about change, it's not a word that we often associate with change. But when we think about those things that we're experiencing in our organizations, we might adopt new systems. Well, those systems are probably being adopted because they're supposed to help us in some way, whether it's get our work done better or faster, right? Solve problems without creating problems. But those systems, when we change them, it could feel hard. Same thing, teams are asked to do things that are a little bit different, new priorities that come up, new processes that they're supposed to follow. And so even at a team level, an organizational level, yeah, help people, help cut through that resistance and maybe help people get excited about change. And that's what I'm going to ask you to think of. Is it change that you're leading or that you'd like to lead? I'm going to give you some time in just a minute to think about that. Now, a little bit about me and my background. So I'm an organizational psychologist. Some of you know what that means, some of you don't. But for me, I study people in the workplace. And for over a decade now, I've worked as a coach, a consultant, a facilitator, a leader, a manager. I've played a lot of roles, worn a lot of hats. But what I care very deeply about is two things. How do you help people perform their best and feel their best at work? And you probably care about that too, whether for yourself and for other people. And that's what this is about. Through the change that we deal with, how do I help people perform, adopt the change? And how do I help also people feel okay about it, even when change is hard? How do I help people feel better about it, deal with some of the psychological impact of change? We're going to give you some tools to help you diagnose the possible psychological impact of change today. So I'm going to get excited. I'm getting excited. Now, you heard a little bit about me, and I want to hear from you throughout the session, whether it's in chat or whether it's out loud, and I'll give you opportunities to share. But let's pause. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Think of one thing that goes wrong when you go through change. What's one thing that goes wrong when you go through change? Yep. So what often creates those problems? In chat, Sarah has already kicked us off. Small step, open up chat, type in a word, a phrase. It could be anything. So what goes wrong? What creates problems? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm. Get it. We all get it. And whether you feel like an expert on change or not, we can tell from the chat that we actually have a pretty good understanding of how change, the obstacles at least, or that gets in the way of change. Some of it has to deal with communication. We're actually going to talk about, Leah, right? Very simply, the opposite of under communication would be over communication, which seems intuitive, but one of the biggest failure points that we hear over and over again. And as an organizational consultant, I facilitated change, both big and small. And I could tell you that that's a big problem for people. what the communication just wasn't enough. We assumed that if we sent one email out that one time, that the what people are going to do the thing. No, they don't. So under communication, we'll talk about over communication and add some nuance there. Expectations, yes, Sarah. What one thing, and it deals with communication, is what is the message? In this case, what is the vision for this change? And we'll talk about how you could actually manage expectations a lot better when you're thinking about what is your vision statement for this change? What are you actually going to communicate with people? And we'll think about a version of that today. Breaking trust, and a lot of it, Elizabeth, what we hear is when it comes to breaking trust, is that people didn't feel included in some way, or they didn't think that their the impact was assessed, right? Like, how is this going to impact me? I didn't feel like people didn't put in that time and effort. Confusion. So there's lots of things that go wrong. We want to prevent that. That's what this workshop is about. We're going to give you, we usually do this in a 2-hour workshop. We're going to focus on some of the most important things in the session. So we're going to give you some tools, but before we get in there, I want you to open up today's worksheet or use a piece of paper. And we'll drop the worksheet link in chat. We'll even drop the document in chat. At the very top, just jot down a change you'd like to see or that you're going to see. We're going to workshop this today. Remember, changes can be individual. I want someone to do something different. Or a group of people. Change can also be, I want to use, I'd like people to change this process. Getting a little bit bigger. So the process might affect multiple people and stakeholders. You might even go bigger. Maybe it's changing a system. I want people to use this new system, performance management system or workflow, productivity system. Some of you, it might deal with structural changes to the team, which is what we went through at LifeLabs. We've changed our team structure. New leaders, new teams. Okay, let me hear from you. So I just like to invite, let's say, one or two of you to unmute and just share a change that you're thinking about. Again, it's not about having the right change, but just like what's a change you're thinking of today. So let's just get a couple people. You could just unmute and just say your name so I can hear you. Yeah, let's invite one of you at least to help the rest of the group. Okay,
Hi,
Sarah,
Sarah.
thank you. All right, Sarah.
I'll volunteer. So we are implementing leveling. So using leveling for performance reviews and promotions for the first time.
Wow. And what was so thank you for sharing. So leveling for performance reviews. So this, I'm going to guess that, Sarah, this has to do with a performance review may determine what level you get to, but if you get to that next level, is that right?
Yeah, they'll go hand in hand, both for growth and development, but have a culture of either promoting just for the squeaky wheels, and maybe not always ready.
Yeah.
And also just helping new managers, evaluate their team in the first place. So just consistency across the whole company. Lots of
Love
things.
it. Love it. And so I'm great. That was going to be my secondary question, which is what is some of the reasoning behind the change and the intentions behind it or the goal of it? And Sarah, you're already getting to that, like this aspect of, more accurately evaluating performance, especially and identifying underperformance is something I'm hearing, right? We say squeaky wheels, but to help us better identify underperformance. And then this aspect of consistency across how we rate performance, which is amazing. Those are really great goals. And of course, despite that, even though there's really great intentions, you might run into resistance, or fear or reactions to this. And today, something that you might get, Sarah, is how can I cut through that more effectively? All right. Anyone else? So we have new performance management or performance reviews system. In chat, if you'd like to, if you're feeling more comfortable, just type it in chat, just so we could see examples of the changes that you're thinking about and you're applying to today's session. And it also gives people an opportunity to think of a change if they haven't thought of one already. So in chat, share any of those changes that you're thinking of. Okay. As you're doing that, for those of you who are unfamiliar with LifeLabs, you may have heard a little bit about us. We train and develop leaders, managers, and teams on every continent. We've trained thousands of leaders across thousands of companies. And that's what we do. It's our bread and butter. It's what I love. It's what I've been doing for years, over a decade now. And I share this with you because not only do we train and develop people on skills that matter in the workplace, just like how to lead change, and I've done this with managers and leaders in so many different industries, but we're also learning constantly from organizations of what are the challenges that you're dealing with now. So we stay up with the research on what people are dealing with. What are change leaders dealing with? One of the things we help really with is how to lead change around going from in-person to remote or hybrid work. Some of you are like, whoa, oh my gosh, I wish we had some time to pause and think about how we rolled out hybrid work and remote work. We're still kind of going through the changes around that. But those are things that we tend to study and look at. Here's what we found, and here's where we're going to focus the rest of today's session on. The things that we found that change leaders do differently are, one, they actually understand not only change, but how people might respond to change. They didn't necessarily know that they were good at doing this, but we've discovered this. They're good at understanding how might this change be received and how is it going to impact people. They also do the work of actually going out and understanding how their change is going to impact people, which is the ideal way to do it. Right? So we'll talk through understanding change so that you can better predict how people might respond to your changes or other changes that you're dealing with, and actually even think about yourself. Then we'll talk through just a few tools, really simple things that might help you make change easier and even get people excited. The small things often matter, and we're going to focus on some of those small things that really matter to help other people to change. And then finally, just in like the last few minutes, we'll talk about this idea of staying changeable and adaptable. It's one of the new rising core skills for employees is this aspect of staying changeable and adaptable. How might I actually build that into what we already do? And we'll focus on how to stay changeable. All right, let's get into understanding change. First thing I'd like all of you to do, and I can't see you, if you turn your cameras on, that would be great. But if not, that's okay. But I want you all to do this. Go ahead and cross your arms. Just cross your arms. Yeah, it feels comfortable. Some of you already have your arms crossed when you came into the workshop. So you're like, well, I'm already here. Now, I want you to get nice and comfortable. And now quickly cross your arms the other way. Yeah, just quickly cross them the other way. You ran into something. You ran into this tension that we're seeing on the screen. So what you're seeing on the screen is essentially what you just experienced. On the left, this is a visual representation of what we might call a new habit that's forming. There are these neurons with their dendrites, and they're reaching out to one another. But as we keep doing that thing, so as you keep crossing your arms the opposite way, you'll start to get a little bit more, the habit will form a little bit tighter, and then you get these tighter neural pathways all the way to, this is the visual representation of a well-established habit. And we know this. Exactly, Sarah. So we know that when we're doing something and we've gotten used to it, it's just the way that we're doing it, this is what happens in the brain. We form these tight neural pathways. But here's the thing, here's the actual takeaway. We know that new habits need to form. But when we have to form a new habit, we're actually losing out on the old habit. And so what happens is when we're actually asked to do something new, or whether that's, follow a new process, or whether that's, get a new manager or join a new team, use a new system, change our values, Sarah, it actually gets processed as a loss by the brain, a loss of this habit, right? This tightly wound neural network. Now, this idea of loss tends to be associated with grief. Now, you could see up here, some of you are actually familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and their 5 stages of grief, in which their original research, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, their research was on people who were diagnosed with terminal illness and how they responded. Then they partnered with psychologists such as David Kessler. And what they found was when people go through change, it's actually quite similar to how people experience grief. And they expanded it a little bit. And so you could see here, it's like a roller coaster, right? When people say that change is like a roller coaster, it is. But I want you to take a look. Now, we're not going to go deep into this today, but when someone says, oh, we're doing something new, there may be a little like shock and denial. Well, really? Why do we need to do this? What's the point? I really don't think it's going to go through. Like, I don't actually think this is going to affect us. Like, do we really have to do it? So there you can see, like, some people go through these particular stages. And the point here is you see the line as that we follow. That line represents what we usually see as engagement and performance. How committed, motivated, and how high performing are people throughout the process. So there's going to be a dip. And this is something I normalize for managers and leaders. When you go through change, there's likely going to be a dip in engagement and motivation because it's a change. The real goal is understanding that we do go through stages. We are going to likely have some sort of dip at some point, but the goal is how do we get people through this curve and to this other side, to this commitment? And what we found is there are particular, what we might call sensitivity areas that the brain is kind of looking for and sensitive to. So it's then, what is the brain actually monitoring throughout that change process? What's going to get people into that shock and denial and depression where we're not really performing, we're not really engaged? So we're going to go through these 5 areas. Now, if you've taken our effective one-on-ones workshop, we actually talk about this. These are engagement and motivation indicators. These are predictors of whether people are going to adopt the change, keep working towards the change, where they're going to stay committed throughout it. So let's go through each one, and we're going to be thinking about what we're sensitive to when change happens. So certainty. For everybody, almost everybody, we have a craving for certainty. We want to know what's ahead of us. And when change happens, even small ones, part of what the brain is responding to are these questions. This loss of predictability, or what is it that I don't know? What are the unknowns? Talk about managing expectations. This is really where we have an opportunity here to manage expectations, to give people a sense of what's coming up and how this is going to impact them. Then there's this other piece of just, will I be able to handle it? And we call that like, how will I be able to cognitively, deal with this particular change? So that's certainty, and it impacts everyone. But I know some of you, including myself, who are pretty okay with a lack of certainty. I wouldn't say that this one is my biggest sensitivity area, though it will go down a little bit throughout change. Let's go to the next one, autonomy. Now, this comes with this, am I losing control and decision-making power? When we're told to do something, already right there, you're going to see autonomy levels possibly shrink. Did I get a say? Not only that, is this change impacting my ability to make decisions around how I do my work, the results that I produce in my work? And then there's also this aspect of, well, am I being represented in some way? Right? Someone mentioned breaking trust with people. How one of the biggest challenges is people, they go through change and trust was broken. And part of it is people didn't feel like their voice was heard, that they weren't included somehow in the change. Right? So that also deals with autonomy. But let's go on. Meaning. What does this link up to? We talk a lot with managers when we do this workshop, managers and leaders, about the importance of linking up. How does this change link up with some bigger picture initiative? People have a craving for meaning. And when it comes to dealing with change, it is important for folks to know, why does this even matter? Not only that, when we think about change, there's also, is this change making my work matter less? Right? So how does my work matter in this big change or little change? The next one, progress. Is this going to slow me down or speed me up? I know a lot of folks who come into workshops, this workshop, and they say, Brendan, we're doing this thing because it's going to help people save time. And then they wonder, why are people resisting this? Why are people upset about this? And likely it's because even though it might help them save time, there's still a lack of acknowledgement that there may be a slowdown. Learning something new requires an unlearning. It requires a relearning. Not only that, sometimes when we think, oh, this new system or this new thing is going to help you, we don't recognize that there was a lot of effort and energy put into the old thing. I know that. In fact, let me just ask you, you could put like an emoji in chat. How many of you have had a change where you switched to something new and you felt a sense of loss of all the work you put into the old thing? Like for me, I had to learn, I'm using a new performance management system. Well, I, I felt like I had all this time and energy and notes and things that were not transferred over. They're in the old performance management system that I can't access anymore. So some put in chat some emoji or indication if you've ever felt a sense of loss starting over, having to use this new thing and having all that time and energy put into the old thing. Just put it up in chat if you feel me on that one. Everyone's like, no. No. Yeah. See, yeah, I knew there was at least one of you out there feeling wacky with me. Okay. So let's keep it moving. Social inclusion. Now, there's there's a few things that come up with social inclusion. The biggest one here is fairness. Is this unequally distributed, right? So changes in team structure. Well, is somebody's workload more than mine? Is somebody's workload less than mine? Is this change impacting me more disproportionately than other people? Is this going to change our culture or my value? So here's what I'd like you to do. We call this our CAMPS model of diagnosing change. And we're going to send you some stuff. You'll get some stuff after the session as well. But think about it, your camps, right? What camp are you in? Are you in the resistant camp or are you in the more committed camp? How do I get people to the more committed camp? Well, part of it is understanding what are people sensitive to and dealing with that. So I want to ask you this, and you could type this in chat. What do you think your brain is most sensitive to? Is it certainty, autonomy, meaning, progress, or social inclusion? Think of the change you've been put through. For me, my biggest one is progress. So what is your brain most sensitive to? Type that in chat. Mm. And Daniel, thank you for sharing in chat. I'm thinking maybe everyone's thinking about this. Daniel, if you don't mind, let me just double tap on your meaning. What was when you picked meaning? What was the reason for that, or what did that remind you of? If you wouldn't mind.
I think a lot of times when I go through change, I consistently keep asking the question, why? Like, what is the purpose of this? So just, I think getting to the heart of why there's a change in the first place and how it's going to help me moving forward.
Yep. Right. So for you, and we're going to think about this later, Daniel. When someone is introducing change to you, we're going to call that the vision statement. It's going to be really important for them to have a why statement in there, and even a why statement that's going to give you the information that you need to go. Okay, I can understand, and that's so important because for others that might be the same way. But you could see, Daniel, you have some other folks who are a little bit different. They may need more information around certainty. And Gabriel doubles down with you on meaning. Do I buy in or not? Yep. Yeah. Because some people will do it. You introduce change, people will do it. They don't want to lose their jobs or they just don't want to cause trouble. But it's interesting how you'll see that even after change happens, people are still resistant. They're still demotivated. It lingers on if we don't address these issues in the beginning. Sarah, meaning. So what I'd like you to do is if you think about yourselves, this is going to help you think about other people too. And this is something we do in the full workshop is really start thinking about with the change initiative that we're thinking of coming into this session, Who are the people who are going to be impacted? Let's just think of a few people who would be impacted and consider how, what's going to be important to them. What might they feel like, what are they going to be most sensitive to here? And ideally, we can ask questions. We can ask questions to get at what matters to people, and we can address these particular areas. But just thinking about the change that you wrote down in the beginning, or any change that you're going through, I want you to pick which cancer area you feel you might want to focus on. Just do it. You could write it down. You could put it in your heads. Which cancer area do I feel like people might be sensitive to, or this change might impact negatively, perhaps? And we're going to use that. We'll use that insight in our next spot. Right. So the takeaway is, whenever we're approaching change, ideally we do a CAMS check first. Really assess, what are people going to be sensitive to? Where might I get resistance? And that's going to help inform how I help other people change. So understanding change, it's processed as loss. We have our CAMPS sensitivity areas: certainty, autonomy, meaning, progress, social inclusion. Don't worry, you'll get that stuff in some follow-up materials. You don't have to memorize it. But then, how do I help other people change? We're going to focus on just 3 different tools that you might use to approach this. So let's talk about how to help other people change and build off of what we just did. Now, one thing, change is a process. Some of you are familiar with Kurt Lewin, who is a psychologist, really one of the pioneers studying organizational culture change. And really, their theory around organizational culture change stands up pretty well today. It's a process, a 3-phase process, just to simplify the complexity around change. There's an unfreezing, where we have to unfreeze from our current habits, our current understanding, our current viewpoints. Then we get into this liquid form where, okay, now we have to adopt the new process, the new system. We have to buy in and now commit. And then finally, it's okay, we keep doing the thing. We stay motivated and stay committed. Think about the upward curve on that change curve. We're now committed, we're bought in, we see the value, we're remembering to do the thing, right? So that refreezing. We're going to talk about one tool for each one of these. It's like an abridged version of our full workshop. So let's go through, and we're going to actually apply these to the change initiatives that we're bringing into today's session. Now, one of the first things that we hear from people when it comes to challenges around change is there was just ineffective communication, or some of you put like mismanaged expectations. And so what we found is that when it comes to change, the most effective change leaders, the most effective change initiatives, there were vision statements shared, not the vision statement that you see on the company website. Although it's somewhat similar, it's a vision for the change that helps unfreeze people's resistance. It helps kind of break through some of those sensitivity areas. And we're going to actually look at how to craft our own. So let's go through this vision statement recipe. All right, think of this as a recipe for effective strategic communication. I love this so much, because when we think about how do I communicate this change with people, especially in the beginning, how do I tell people about it? Well, we found that there are some magic ingredients. Now let's go through each one. Acknowledgement statements, heart, head, and urgency statements. We're trying to keep it simple here. In fact, by the end of this session, you could probably go to an email that you got about a change that's coming up, and you could do an audit to see if it had these recipe ingredients and which ones of them were strong, which of the ingredients were strong, and then which, you needed a little bit more sprinkle, right? So let's do it. Acknowledgement statements, that is the importance of acknowledging the challenge or the resistance that's already there to the change. I know people, when I've worked with leaders in the past, they're like, why would I want to do that, Brendan? Why would I want to tell people I know that adopting this new process is going to be challenging for people? Well, let's think about it. What happens when we don't do that? What happens when change managers or change leaders or organizations just throw a change out, but without acknowledging that there's difficulty or risk or challenge? Anyone have a thought on this? What happens when they don't acknowledge those things? Feel free to unmute and share. Mm. Yeah, Sarah dropped it in chat. Yep. There's this assumption that gets created that they just don't get it. They don't understand us. When we think about breaking trust, it really starts with that initial communication. Do they really get our point of view on this? Are they considering what's going to pop up in my head as soon as I hear we're using this new, go to your change, this new performance review system? Are they already acknowledging my concerns? I tend to be less resistant. Humans tend to be less resistant when you acknowledge their concerns. It doesn't mean scare people. It just means, hey, we've heard from you. We understand you. Right? And that's an important piece of a vision statement. Now, let's move it along. Right. So now that we've acknowledged some of the concern, that's why we do the camps chat. Right. I understand that for you all, you may be wondering, why are we doing this? And wondering why now? So let's get into the actual change. Hard statements. Hard statements may come in the form of imagine if we could do XYZ. Like imagine if we can save 20 to 30 minutes each day on this one tasks that we do. Or people will tell a story, right? That in some ways, or a metaphor that describes the change. So when we think about heart statements, it's people who make statements, they share things to try to appeal to some of your emotions. Not everyone's good at this. Now, some people might think of visionary leaders. People who are visionary leaders, they are good at making me feel emotions. Well, they're probably just using heart statements. That's not the only type of statement that people need when it comes to unfreezing, when it comes to reducing resistance to change, because not everyone resonates well with those hard statements. They also need head statements, right? Think about this, like the prefrontal cortex, that cognitive center for logic. What is the logic behind this? Not just the feelings behind it, but what's the data telling us? And so this may include, okay, here's what the research, you may have collected data behind it. You may have, think about saving time. Well, how much time? Did you do a time audit? It takes people this much time. Well, with this new thing, it's going to take this much time, right? Or when it comes to, is it going to help me increase my sales? By how much? How do I know? Right? So you may resolve with head statements some of that meaning, right? What's the meaning behind it? When it comes to people's resistance to adopting new systems, because they think it's going to slow me down. I know what I'm doing in this system. Well, maybe we actually tested it, and it actually is, in general, going to save people this much time. So things like that. Here is the difference, just some visual. I want you to think of this. Do I resonate more with heart statements or head statements? Type in chat. I know not all of you are typing in chat, but hey, I'm going to invite you in. You could say heart or head. What do you tend to resonate with? What is it that you tend to resonate with? Heart statements or head statements? You probably like both, but you have one that you're likely biased towards. Yeah. Yep, Kylie. So you need a balance. Yeah. But you can imagine if you didn't have the heart statement in there, though, it would feel too cold, maybe. So I want you to notice, right? We have some head, some heart, some both. You will likely communicate more effectively with the one you prefer. You may lose people. And that's something that I think I had a lot of change leaders notice for themselves. They look back at their communication, they go, Brendan, I was so logic based. I feel like I lost people. I came across as cold and calculated, and they needed to feel motivated by me. And I'm just not good at that. It's like, great, then be strategic. You can build that into your plan now. The balance is key. Yeah. So take a look. We actually had a company who we took this from. They were they were putting out a new performance management system, a new performance review system, and this was just right out of an email that they sent out. Now, feel free to take that if that's something you're doing. So again, it's just these may come up multiple times. You may have multiple heart statements, multiple head statements. Depending on the audience you're talking to, you may shift the heart and the head statements. The whole point is same ingredients, just a different way that you execute on them. And then finally, urgency. Why now? Why do we have to do this now versus later? Now, this just a little nuance here. People need a sense of urgency, right? Why we got to move it. This is why it's so important. This is why it's a priority. So it's not just a long-term thing. This is like, we need to move. Not only that, people tend to be more motivated by loss. Uh, Speaking of what we're talking about, loss. But I don't mean scaring people. So it's not to say we need to do this now because if we don't, our numbers are going to go so low, we'll lose our jobs. Even though that's a reality, we don't want to scare people with change. It is a lost opportunity. Like you're missing out on something. We don't want to be missing out on something is what's going to motivate people. So what I'd like you to do is pause. I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to think of vision statements as you could have a long, detailed vision statement or a short elevator pitch. They can come in multiple forms. I want you to think more of a little short elevator pitch. Think of a change, maybe the one you wrote down, and you could do this on the worksheet. I want you to take a minute to try to get as far as you can. Try crafting a vision statement, like an elevator pitch for that change. And just make up one acknowledgement, one heart, head, and urgency. See how far you can get in this minute. Just try it out. All right. This is one of people's favorite tools whenever they take that full leading change session. And we usually get a chance to hear some folks' vision statement. For sake of time, I want you to think of, if you didn't get to finish, use this, right? Use this as like your ingredients list each time you're crafting messaging, or even go back. Like I said, you could even see previous messaging around change. If you look at your email inbox and find that message, you'll probably see, did it include these ingredients? And if there was a missing piece, a missing ingredient, you could see, that really would have helped. Right. So when we think about unfreezing, it comes down to our strategic communication. So that vision statement is going to make a difference. It will be short, sometimes it will be long, and it will be different depending on the audience that you're talking to. Same ingredients though. Now we're going to get into the change. And it really is about simplification. We're going to keep this simple, but it's forgotten. It is taken for granted that change, even the small ones, it helps to try to simplify the plan and simplify it for people's minds. So when we think about simplifying it, think about what we call reducing the cognitive load of change. It's like any change, you think about we're wearing a backpack. When we're dealing with change, it's either feeling like a heavy load or, we're deliberately doing things to lighten that load. So let's talk about how to do that. One is this aspect of removing before you add. Anything we're doing might feel like an addition. This is on top of the work that I'm already doing. So I'm already doing this, and now I have to do this, or I'm already having to do the current process and I have to learn the new process. So when we think about removing before you add, is there, thinking strategically, okay, well, when we're going through change, is there any way I could make there work easier so that give them cognitive space for the change? Is there anything I could put on pause or kind of reduce the priority level of so that they can really invest in whatever the change might be? There's that. There's also just, removing steps for people. You see this with certain organizations where, when they're rolling out a new change, they try to reduce steps, so that might include, well, instead of having people, download the new software, okay, can we automate this? Can the IT department roll out to everyone's computer the new software so that they don't even have to download it? So where can I remove steps for people? Where can I remove weight from their workload so that they could take this on, right? So remove before you add, and show people that you're doing that. That's another key tip. It's like, we're removing this, we're deprioritizing this. It makes a big difference for folks. Then there's focusing on small steps. Think about progress. In the camps model, we all have a craving for progress, that dopamine. And when even small changes can feel overwhelming, it could feel big, and like there's a lot of steps that it's complicated. And something else we see change leaders do and change managers do is help people take step by step. Sometimes that means, okay, this, if we're rolling something out, is there any way we can chunk the rollout so it's, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here? I've seen this happen with companies who are adopting new systems. They'll have folks get together. Maybe it's in a company meeting that already happens or a team meeting. And they'll say, okay, use that meeting. Let's create 20 minutes of the meeting just for this change. We'll have people open up the new system, create their logins, and then maybe, well, try using it, and we'll all go through it together. And so help folks take the steps, and that creates a sense of progress, but also think about certainty. Okay, I think I could do this, right? We need those small steps. And that's another thing to be strategic of is, okay, how can I chunk this down? This other aspect, this is something I think is completely missed, is can we link the change into something that they already do? Right. So making it seem less foreign. Hey, folks, this new performance review system, don't worry, you're already doing performance reviews. Just statements like that make a difference. Here's how this new system is kind of like your old system. So how do we make comparisons? I've seen people release tutorials showing here's the old system, here's the new system, and the feature that exists here, so that it doesn't seem like this new foreign thing, like it's actually pretty simple. Or if you're changing a process, here's what's not changing in the process. Here's what is, giving folks a sense of certainty around that. Or even this aspect of using language that's familiar to them, right? What is, language that makes sense to them versus concepts that are kind of foreign. I'd like you to pause. You could do this on a worksheet or a sheet of paper. Just jot down one idea to simplify whatever change you're dealing with or you're leading. Maybe it's, I want to remove this. Or it's, help folks take small step 1, 2, 3. Or, link it in or show them how it links in with something that they already do. Pause and try that out. All right. Again, if you didn't finish, don't worry. You have this worksheet. You can use this after the session too, or whenever you're going through change, just break out this worksheet. And Sarah, I am serious. You can craft a vision statement for getting people to do the dishes. You want to influence your family, your kids, your spouse, your roommate, craft a small vision statement and see what happens. Yeah, you will. You'll get that buy-in. Here's the last piece, right? When you think about refreezing, some of you mentioned in the beginning of the session, what's a big problem? Under communication. Yes, that initial communication and vision matters, but then there's also communication throughout the process. Not just assuming that one message is going to be what we need, but building a plan for over communicating, because people need to see a message multiple times, up to 6 to 20 times, according to research on what we call effective frequency. When messages really stick, we do need them repeated. So let me show you again. We need to hear a message many times. Let's show you again many times before it sinks in. Are you getting it now? Let me just share it in a different way, right? We need what we call diversity, right? Diversity of messaging. So I don't want to just say it's repeating the message over and over and over. what we find is an effective strategy is finding where are the channels we can communicate the message. I'd like to see you. Yes, Sarah, you can craft it for yourself. I don't know how motivating it's going to be, but hey, why not? But let's think about channel diversity. In chat, I just want to see some examples of channels you might use to communicate. These could be systems you could use to communicate. These could be meetings. Maybe it's weekly, monthly newsletters, websites. Let me see some examples. Where might we remind people, prompt people? So I think when we see less effective change initiatives, it's usually not just a lack of communication, like we didn't communicate it enough times for it to be effective and really stick and keep people moving towards it. It's also just we only used one channel or we only use one method of communication. And instead, like, this might be exactly right. Our events, like our weekly team newsletter, right? Put it in there. So think of channel diversity, right? And again, you don't have to do this now, but when you're dealing with change, build a plan. Where am I going to have repetition? What channels am I going to use to communicate? Let me have a strategic communication plan where I have, this post and this post and this email so that I can just quickly keep reinforcing and keep reinforcing. Right? That's something that change leaders do really well. So just to recap, to help other people change, craft that vision statement. That's what effective change leaders do. They have a vision. Then they help simplify the plan through removing steps, getting people to take the first steps, and then also linking things together so it doesn't feel unfamiliar. It's actually not unlike what you already do. And then finally, over communicate, channel diversity. But what if change keeps happening? Because it does. You're about to go on with your lives, and I'm assuming change is coming. And we say, instead of refreezing, at LifeLabs, one of our internal sayings is stay slushy. And I'm going to invite you to use that term if you'd like to. Help people stay slushy. How do you do that? Right? Yes, we think it's cute, Barbara, and that's that's actually a tip that we're going to share with you here. Not just be cute, but when we think about staying changeable, what matters? How do we help people stay slushy? Well, we've learned a couple things, a couple of habits that you might have. One is, where are we normalizing it? So at LifeLabs, this idea of staying slushy and being adaptable is something we talk about all the way through the employee life cycle. And I want you to be thinking of, well, where do I have influence over my team in the employee life cycle? Where are we normalizing change? How, even if we're going through change, are we giving people a sense of certainty when we can, as like, hey, something is upcoming next quarter? Where are we doing that, and how might we do that more effectively? And then the other piece is a little bit more unique, but we see it in other organizations, right? We work with a company, IDEO, which you might be familiar with. They had a team who did this really well, an entire division here on the East Coast. Whenever they were going through change, they say, folks, we're in the fog. We're in the fog. And then they'd have levels of fogginess. It's like thick, really thick fog. And then they're like, we're pulling out of the fog. They had ways of really, coming together and rallying around this aspect of, hey, when we're going through something, we're in the fog. That's why we say, hey, we're in the slush. We need you to be really slushy. We're getting a little bit less slushy. We'll have variations of that. And I know some of you do. You're like, we have the messy middle. Folks, we're in the messy middle. Or we're in the thick of it. Or I see people, we're in the swamp right now. It's like, normalize that. We're feeling a little slowness. We're feeling the hardship of change. We're feeling the loss, uncertainty, autonomy, meaning, progress, and social inclusion. And that's something maybe you take away from this session. Rally around something so that you can feel this shared going through of change, right? Coming together. So to take away, I want you to pick one thing you're going to focus on after this session, whether it's understand how people respond to change, do a TAMPS check, or help other people change with those tools, or just let's focus on staying changeable and adaptable and normalizing it for my team and other people. That's what I hope that you get out of today's session. I want to say it was a pleasure to be with you. What's next? So what is next? Keep staying slushy. Yep, I know. Just for yourself. Like, stay slushy today, tomorrow, this week for yourself. Also, if you are interested in change leadership, helping your managers manage change better, helping people through coaching and feedback, to really get through some of the times that you're in. If you just want people's skills up leveled, hey, reach out to us. We have some links in chat. Just click on those links. It's so easy to talk to us and just get some insight, even if you don't work with us. So that's what I'm going to invite you to do, is contact us if you're interested in our 2-hour workshops, our 1-hour workshops. We have memberships where you can have unlimited access to workshops. I would love to see you in our labs. Just saying. All right. So that's what's next. Also, your feedback matters. Your feedback matters, and it helps us to understand what we're doing well, where we have opportunities for improvement. In chat, you're going to see a link dropped in to provide some feedback to let us know, hey, what did you like from today's session that you could apply, or just that you found interesting? What would you like more of, less of? And you have that link. You can click on it. Take you about a minute to do your feedback. We read every comment and every suggestion. I'll also put if any of you are interested in connecting with me, particularly, I have a LinkedIn page. Would love to connect with you. And I know that many of you are in my field or interested in the things that I'm interested in around organizational psychology, engagement, motivation, coaching, training, those things. I love to connect with folks out in the world. I will be here for some questions if you'd like to ask me about this workshop or about LifeLabs. So I'll stick around for a few minutes as long as we do have. But other than that, thank you for your time, your energy, and your attention. Stay slushy, and I'll see you back here in the lab in the future, hopefully. And have fun at Pando Horizons as well. Thank you to Pando and this partnership. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Sarah. All right, folks. Enjoy your next session. Enjoy the rest of your Pando Horizons. Take care.